In Jim Delaney's own words, how conference realignment shaped college sports. And Big 12 Media Days are today and tomorrow. We'll go through the agenda. And talking about agendas, the Colorado Board of Regents having a retreat today, July 12th, and they dropped in a little bit of extra item in their agenda late in the evening last night. We're going to be going through that as well. Welcome to episode 264 of College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Pflugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our ever-growing channel. Smash that like button if you like our content. Share the video with your family and friends. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. Jim Delany, in his own words now, this was written by Scott Dochterman from The Athletic this morning. We provide a link in the description. We're not going to go through this long, beautiful article written by Scott Dochterman, but we are going to go through some of it. How conference realignment shaped college sports in Big Ten's ex-boss, Jim Delaney's words. It's almost inarguable that the most influential figure in college sports during the past 3 decades, and perhaps ever, was former Big Ten Commissioner Jim Delany in leading the oldest and most financially advanced league from 1989 to his retirement on January 1st, 2020. Delaney orchestrated many of the moves that altered the college sports landscapes for generations to come. Now 75, out of the limelight and living in the Nashville area, Delaney reflected on expansion and conference realignment during his time as Big Ten Commissioner. In an exclusive interview, Delaney identified the primary markers that set off college sports on their current trajectory. Jim Delany pretty much points out 2 major markers. Delaney had plenty to say, so much that his comments will appear in other stories during this series. This is just part 1, ladies and gentlemen. He also chose not to elaborate on meetings with potential expansion candidates because they've signed non-disclosure contracts. In this series of Delaney responses to realignment topics, the first of 2, the former commissioner spoke at length about what he believed drove expansion from the late 1980s through the early 2000s. For Delaney, modern realignment begins with 2 events, both of which predate his days with the Big Ten. The Big East formation on May 31st, 1979 came 1 week before the OVC hired him as its commissioner. The Big East chose 8 urban basketball first members, and in concert with ESPN's debut in September 1979, the league found national footing on television. The other marker, Jim Delaney's second marker, came on June 2nd, 1984, when the United States Supreme Court ruled the NCAA violated the Sherman Act by price fixing and placing artificial limits on its membership through its television policy. Both events work collectively to set the course for the 198 Division I football moves since 1990. Jim Delany. The first thing I would say is the CFA defeats the NCAA. The price fixing was defeated. That would be number 1. Number 2, I think maybe even number 1, is a precursor to 84, the founding of the Big East by Dave Gavitt on a media-based conference. They were mostly Catholic, but not exclusively. They were on the East Coast, and TV underlined it. And there was no football involved. It just was basketball. But the same year the Big East did that, you know what was founded? ESPN. So I would say 79 begins to lay the foundation for a new media entity in ESPN and a conference based on media markets. Again, Jim Delany. The Big East were lucrative in the early 1980s and had to fend off the attempt from then Penn State football coach, athletic director Joe Paterno to pick off Boston College and Syracuse to form an all-sports Eastern League involving Pittsburgh, Rutgers, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, and the Nittany Lions. Gavitt secured Syracuse and Boston College by inviting Pittsburgh on November 18, 1981. It killed Paterno's attempt to get all that Big East, to get an all-East football conference. The next year, Penn State sought admission into the Big East. 6 of the 8 Big East members had to vote yes on Penn State. But the basketball-only schools, Georgetown, St. John's, and Villanova, voted no, which kept Penn State out of the Big East. So Georgetown, St. John's, and Villanova's, those 3 no votes altered the course of conference realignment for the next 40 plus years. Holy smokes. Its ripple effect was profound when Penn State was accepted as a Big Ten member in 1980. That was 8 years after they were rejected by those 3 votes: Georgetown, St. John's, and Villanova. Delaney. If Penn State is with Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Boston College, the East Coast is stabilized, and the Big Ten doesn't have many places to move. So you have a more formidable, a more stable Big East. But in my view, that inability to see the future and the importance of football made the Big East very vulnerable. Notre Dame doesn't ever move. Florida State doesn't move, in my view, if Penn State doesn't move. The SEC was already good with their little move, Arkansas and South Carolina. And Florida State is not going to be pursued by the ACC. I'm saying none of that happens if the Big East expands properly to 8 football schools and 12 basketball schools. But the rationale was that's too many schools. 8 and 12, isn't that kind of quaint? Jim Delaney putting it out there saying, look, if the Big East would have taken Penn State, if they would have formed a more stable created a football conference out on the East Coast, none of this stuff would have happened. Big Ten would not have been able to get Penn State and a whole bunch of other stuff. The ripple effects would not have occurred. It would have changed history probably in the sense that if the East were consolidated with football and you had Syracuse, Boston College, Rutgers, Pittsburgh, Penn State, and maybe West Virginia, and they had full basketball schools, the Big East Publics, plus the Catholics, plus Penn State and a few others, arguably there would have been no vacuum there. No singular event had more impact on expansion and conference realignment than the NCAA versus the Board of Regents case, which included Oklahoma and Georgia University as primary plaintiffs. Beginning in 1952, the NCAA regulated college football on television to ensure competitive balance and exposure while protecting gate revenue. In 1981, the CFA, the College Football Association, which represented several conferences, agreed to a deal with NBC, which was outside the NCAA contracts with ABC and CBS, and that was a huge event. The NCAA threatened sanctions against any school that appeared on NBC, and the suit was filed. Filing amicus briefs on behalf of Oklahoma and Georgia included the CFA, the Southeastern, the Big 8, Southwest, ACC, WAC conferences, and Notre Dame. The Big Ten and the Pac-10 backed the NCAA. District and appeal courts ruled against the NCAA, and the U.S. Supreme Court concurred a 7-2 vote against the NCAA on June 2nd, 1984. Delaney cited the dissent of Justice Byron Wizard White as an impactful in predicting the current environment. White wrote, "The NCAA's plan fosters the goal of amateurism by spreading revenues among various schools and reducing the financial incentives toward professionalism." Delaney. His basic premise for the dissent, Justice White, was that the educational mission, which justified the controls to some extent, didn't get out of hand, and competition get out of hand, was that you need to be able to control this. Otherwise, in a free market environment, it will at a certain point serve the wealthiest and drive education into the background of commercial activity. The key players were the SEC, Notre Dame, CFA president Chuck Nias, and I think the ACC was along for the ride. The WAC was along for the ride. The Southwest Conference was along for the ride. The Big 8, those weren't important. Those weren't the important players that the SEC and Notre Dame were, but they were big numbers. It wasn't very long right before Notre Dame and the SEC pulled out of the CFA and did their own deals. Now you have freedom, and you have the haves pulling away from the have-nots, and we continue to see that even more today. The number of televised games increased 400% between 85 and 1991, according to Delaney, but the advertising rate card got cut, so the nominal dollars available didn't reach 1983 numbers until 1991. But the televised freedom coincided with the several conference changes, starting with Penn State to the Big Ten. Jim Delaney: I thought we could be stronger and get a view into the East Coast, where there were a lot of students to recruit television homes. The money wasn't so big. I just thought more competition, better program, broad-based program, terrific fit. The SEC Commissioner, Roy Kramer, executed a strategic expansion. He wanted to do divisions, and he added South Carolina and Arkansas. I call that a strategic expansion. Gene Corrigan and the ACC, I think, had what I would call a reactionary expansion. He brought in Florida State. I definitely knew Gene well, and I definitely know he was impacted by the growth of the Big Ten. Penn State and Florida State were very similar. One was reaction to the other, and finally. But Roy's SEC expansion was not a reaction to what we did. I think we had seen the divisional opportunity. He was a smart guy. He saw a championship game as a real marketing device, so it was a marketing play, not necessarily a TV play. Read the whole article in the link provided. It's a long one. It's a great article, once again, written by Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Two big markers in Jim Delaney's eyes that created this decades of realignment, conference realignment, was the NCAA losing that court case and against the CFA, and of course, those three no votes at St. John's, Villanova, Georgetown against Penn State becoming a member of the Big East. The ripple effects was huge. Put down your comments and thoughts in the comment section below the video. Let me know what you think were the big markers in creating this conference realignment for the last 4 or 5 decades. Now, what do we have today? Well, first of all, we have the Colorado Board of Regents retreat. Now, this has been scheduled for quite some time, July 12th. It's been on the schedule for months. However, the last point of the agenda, all the way down to the bottom, legal advice on a specific matter, Colorado Boulder Athletics update, that was just added in late last night. What does it mean? We do not know. We just pointed it out on Twitter last night, and we're pointing it out here in episode 264. We're not claiming that this has to do with realignment, that the Colorado Board of Regents on their retreat are talking about realignment at the end of their retreat here on Wednesday. But we just wanted to point out, just to note, that this legal advice on specific matter, Colorado Boulder Athletics update, that was added in just last night to an agenda that had been out there for days. So, we'll keep an eye on it, peek around the corner, keep your head on a swivel. We'll see if anything comes of that. Maybe that has to do with the Pac-12 media package. Maybe Colorado's expected to see that sometime before July 21st. Who knows? We shall see. I just wanted to point that out. And of course, today, Wednesday, is the start of the Big 12 Media Days. Brett Yormark, he's going to be talking here at noon. The commissioner, Brett Yormark, will be fascinating to hear what type of questions he gets, the type of answers he gives to possible realignment, expansion, and all of his plans. It's going to be very fascinating to watch. And then we have also the agenda for Thursday for the Big 12. Take a look at that. Coaches and players talking just like they do on all these conference media days. It will be fascinating to see. Of course, Big 12 media days, you have the 4 new schools joining the Big 12. Houston, BYU, UCF, and Cincinnati. Big day for those 4 schools, for their fan bases. So, throughout the day today, if we get any big news, any breaking news coming out of that Big 12 meeting, we'll do something here at Peek Around the Corner. So keep your head on a swivel. Stick with us, stay with us as we cover everything in college football. Until next time, From all of us at PATC to all of you, please, you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.